Hi, welcome to some projects that we're making. We're making a series of pin cushions, all different ones, different techniques, different sizes, different styles, different colours. What more could you want in pin cushions? They make great gifts, they make all sorts of good things. So this time we're doing a series of 20 pin cushions. There's a pattern available for the 20 pin cushions on the website on GourmetQuilter.com. We're doing one each day for 20 days. We're up to day 5. And there's going to be a video and a downloadable pattern for each one if you go in and purchase it on the website, GourmetQuilter.com. So what we're doing today is pincushion number 5. So if you are receiving the pattern, you will have something that looks a little bit like this that you can download and print, that gives you all the information you need, and then I'm just here to show you how it's all done. So what we're doing this time is quite a long pincushion. These are quite handy. I love to have something like this either in front of my sewing machine or at the other end, maybe next to my sewing machine or along the arm of a chair, or really just because. So this is a little bit of, it's kind of a foundation piecing, and we are going to piece onto a foundation cloth, but we don't have to take it out again. So it's not like the paper foundation that you've got to rip out or anything like that. We're stitching it onto some cloth. So in the pattern, you've got a full-size pattern piece here. They always look bigger than they end up, but it's the right size. So we can trace all that. So what I'm suggesting is that you use something like a piece of muslin, calico, some fabric in between that you don't need, but possibly something that's not too busy because we are drawing on it. It's not going to be seen. It's right inside. You never see this piece of fabric, so it doesn't actually matter what it is other than that you need to be able to see your lines. So if you've got a light box or light source of some sort, you can lay your fabric over that. The fabric is slightly larger than we're going to trim it down to, and that's so that we've got a little bit of room to move. And then we can just trace. I've gone ahead and I've done all mine, but you can just trace all those lines just with a pencil. As I said, nothing's going to be seen with this, so it's quite straightforward. So because I've already done mine, that's good, but that's how you might want to mark it all. You could, of course, sew straight onto the paper, but then you've got to take that out because the paper's not so good when you're doing pins. So I've got my piece here, and then we just need some strips. So this one I've done in a very orderly manner. The one I'm going to show you today, I'm going to just use random colours, random strips, although I've got 2 sizes of strips. I've got some narrower ones and some that are not a lot wider, but just a little bit wider. So the same size strips as I've used here, but I'm just going to be putting them in random colour order. So what we need to do when we do this sort of thing is we're starting on this band here. And that's because we need to cover the ends here. So we can start sewing our strips across here, and then we can come and flip them, because it's a stitch and flip sort of system that we're using. And then we can flip them that way, and then we can flip them that way, and then we can put our larger piece on last. So I'm going to just get started on this. I've, as I said, got these strips. I haven't cut them to length or anything. I can trim the length as I go. So I'm going to position my first one in this corner here, which is going to be a little bit wider, and I'm going to position it not to the first line that I've drawn here, but to the second line, because that's going to be our sewing line there. And it just needs to extend a little bit beyond, because it's going to be covered by the piece that's coming across that way. So if we line that up to there, we can trim that off now if you want to. You know that it's long enough now. And then we're going to put another piece next to that, and really if I'm just doing them random, I'm just not even going to look. So this one here we're going to lay with the raw edges together, and we're going to stitch a 1/4 inch just there, and I will trim that off because otherwise it's just going to get in the way. So I'll go to the sewing machine and we'll just start sewing these bits on so that you see how it all works. So those edges should all sit together. So we're just starting to sew a little bit beyond the actual line into this other area that's going to be covered up, so those ends will be covered. I've got my 1/4 inch foot on, so that's running along the edge of the fabrics there. Oops. Now you can press everything as you go if you want to, or you can finger press it over. We're just going to flip that over now. So what you should find is that now should be lining up that raw edge with the next line that's there. And it won't matter if it's ever so slightly out, but it should in general be doing that. And so then we can come along with another colour, doesn't really matter which one. As I said, it's all quite random. If you have a colour scheme that you wanted to do, like I really enjoyed putting this one together, I love that little black and white stripe. But we often have little tiny bits of fabric. So now I'm lining up with that raw edge again. I am going to just snip that off there. So we'll be trimming all this up around the edges later, so you don't need to worry. So if your fabric has come in a little bit short of this line, that's okay. Position this one again at the line. It just helps keep everything in place if we follow the lines with the sewing. So that's starting to build nicely. There's no right or wrong, there's just a whole lot of sewing fun. So I'm just going to line that up again there. Great for using up some really tiny pieces, this sort of work. Okay, so we've got a wider piece coming in next. So we've got that flipped over, and then we can put a wider one in. I might use this one that's sitting here conveniently. And same thing, we're still lining up with that edge because we want to sew right on that line there, and then the width is going to go over that way there. So we'll get this one on and you can see what I mean. And then I'll probably continue on. So you probably don't need to watch the whole thing. You need to go and get your own done. So that's coming over there nicely. Now that has come in just a touch short here. I've obviously sewn slightly crooked there, but that's fine. I'll still line up my next piece with that line, and that will keep everything on track. So I'm going to continue on now and keep sewing my band across, and then I'll come and show you how we go about doing the other ends as well. So I've gone ahead and I've done all that band through there. That's looking pretty good. I'm just giving it a nice little press. Everything's gone together really well. So now we've done that, we can start doing these other ones because we're going to be flipping over that way. And just remember, we are going to be trimming off some of these edges and things. So a little bit more fabric is better than not enough, I have to say. So I'm going to start coming along here now. So again, we've got this line that some of the fabric's just overlapping just a touch, but we can lay our piece along that edge there, and then we're just doing a 1/4 inch seam along there, and then that will flip over that way. So I'll go ahead and get that one on, and then it's going to be all more of the same again. These pieces are a little bit longer, possibly a little bit easier to manage, but also probably better if we actually press rather than just finger press when they're longer. Just a bit easier for them to go over. So that's looking pretty good. So I just need to keep going now with some other pieces here, just the same as I've been doing until I reach this corner out here, and then I'll come back and I'll do exactly the same coming over this way as well, finishing with this last strip here, because then we're going to put a whole piece on as we did here for the end part of the pincushion. So I'll continue on until I get ready to put that piece on so that I can show you how we do that. So I'm really pleased with this. I love all the random colour placing. So I've gone ahead, I've got all my pieces in place to do something like this one. It's exactly the same amount of sort of pieces, the same pattern that I've used. You could of course do it even more random. You don't have to have organised sizes like I have, but I thought if I was going to show you, you might need some sort of organisation. You never know. So what I'm going to do now is put this where I've got this larger piece of that main colour. I'm using this dark colour this time, and that's going to go over here. So what I've got is a rectangle that's going to be long enough. It needs to be long enough to do the length. We will be trimming this down, but nonetheless it needs to be that sort of length. So what I've done is to get my diagonal, because this was all done on the diagonal there, I've actually already just pressed a fold over, so I've just lined those edges up from the point, pressed that to get my diagonal, and now I just need to position it here as if it was going to be 1/4 of an inch in. So we're going to be stitching on that diagonal fold line. We want it to be coming at right angles to our main piece, and we want this to be the 1/4 inch seam, so give or take. So I'm suggesting that perhaps we put a couple of pins in just to make sure it stays in place now that we've got it there, and then stitch along that line that I've just folded. You could draw that line if you're not sure that you can see the fold, but it should be a 1/4 of an inch in, so that this strip ends up being approximately 1/4 of an inch wide as it turns out. So I'll go ahead and I'll stitch that so that you can see how that all works. And it's really just a line, it's nothing terribly complicated. Positioning it is probably the main thing. Sewing it is quite straightforward. And remember, we will be trimming things off as well. So I've done that. I'm pleased with the way that's all sitting. It's basically in a rectangle there. I am just going to trim away that corner so we can fold back our foundation there, so that I can just get rid of that extra layer. We don't need any more layers in there. And then I can press that in place. And then we can trim this piece down to the size that we actually want, because it's a little oversized at the moment, but I'm loving those colours and things just for a change. So this is the back piece, so it's all just plain on the back, and I've just used a really lightweight batting. It's a synthetic one, I think, but it's just a little something to give it a little bit of body without being too much. So I just need to trim this down to this size now. So when you do this sort of thing, you just make sure that everything is fitting within, front and back. Make sure that everything's covered, and I could actually just lay that on there and trim around that, then I know it's all going to work. Just make sure that you've got your corners where you want them. I think it's all looking pretty good. Everything's enclosed there. And we can trim these, so they need to be the same size front and back, and then we're going to join them together, leaving a little gap for turning. And then you probably don't necessarily need to have a little piece of batting behind the front, although I've got a piece there, so I'll most likely will include it because that's what I do. So we're looking pretty good. We've got our front all trimmed up nicely now, and our back. So I'm just going to stitch that. So I'm going to leave a gap for turning and for filling through. So I'm actually going to leave that. I could leave it on the end here, but I'm a little bit concerned that this is now quite bulky to get through a small gap at the end there. So I'm just going to leave a gap along this bit here so that there's no piecing along there. It doesn't need to be a huge gap, but just enough to be able to get that through. So I'm just stitching with a 1/4 inch seam all the way around except for my gap. And then we're going to make the little short corners like we did on a previous pincushion, so I'll show you how to do that as well. But for now, 1/4 inch all the way around. So I've gone ahead, I've stitched all the way around, and now I'm just doing these little corners, so the little paper bag style corners, as they're often known as. So I've done some of them, I've just got one more to go. So we just need to get the corner to open out, so I've left the hardest one to reach. It's also behind some of the piecing that we've done, so it's a little bit stiffer there, so I thought that one would be one to show you. So we just needed to pull those corners out so that they're sitting, so that this seam is sitting centre there, and the fold has gone through the stitched point there. And then we're just going to stitch across that corner about 1/2 inch from that point, so not the point of the fabric, but from the stitched point. So on the sewing machine foot plate here, there is a little line at 1/2 inch, so I'm just using that as my guide. So I'm putting that little stitched point right on that 1/2 inch line, and then I'm just stitching right across that little corner all the way. And that has hopefully given us some nice little corners there. So I would suggest just clipping off the actual corners now that they're all stitched. And then we can turn it out and fill it. This is so much fun to make all these pincushions. I'm having a good time, I hope you are. It's a little bit stiff because of all that bulk of the piecing that we've done, but nothing that we can't manage. So I'm going to use my trusty little tool here to help me push that other end out because it's quite a long way away. So I'm just going to push those corners so that they're sitting nicely. So it's the little squared off corners that we've got there. And now we're ready to fill that, but I am just going to press these little edges in that we're going to be stitching in just to make sure that there's a nice little edge to stitch to. And then I'm going to fill this again with the crushed walnut shell because it sits really nicely in there, and I'm finding that I'm just liking it more and more. So I've got my shell here, I've got my funnel. I'm just going to pour it in. So all that's left now is to fill it and then just hand stitch it closed. So I'm just letting that funnel pour that shell in. So it is quite a long way down, but you can't really squash shell like you can with fibre fillings and things, but you can encourage it just to sort of fill the corners and things a little bit. So just sort of manoeuvre it around a little bit, and then we'll just put a little bit more in. So I'll go ahead and finish filling it and stitching it closed so that I can show it to you all finished. So I'm pretty happy with my pincushion. It's looking pretty amazing, really. I really like this one, and now I really like this one, and so now I don't know which one is my favourite. I think that's a really useful sort of pincushion. If you don't want to stick pins in where all the piecing is, there's plenty of area up here. As I said, just near your sewing machine or along an arm of a chair or on a table. Just what more could you want? So that was pincushion number 5, and I will see you again with pincushion number 6.